October 2018. A lot of young people have a false sense of security. I don't know if this is due to the movies we watch or the way we were raised, but its presence in our culture is undeniable. I was definitely among that group. I felt like I was the main character in my own motion picture, that no matter what situation I found myself in, I would always do something clever to escape. I felt invincible. After all, nothing really bad ever happens to the hero, right? Well, a few years ago, I got my first bitter taste of reality. Before I start the story, I think I should give some background on myself. My name's David. I had just turned 21, and I was in my junior year of college. It was October of 2018 in a small town in rural Missouri. During the previous summer, my girlfriend and I moved into a small rental home together that was just a few minutes off campus. Our home wasn't in the worst part of town, but it also wasn't some kind of rich, gated community. It was just a pretty standard rental home in a dingy neighborhood in a already dingy old town. Like I mentioned before, it was around mid-October when this happened, so we were knee-deep into spooky season. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of Halloween Day. In fact, I think it's a little overrated. But I do enjoy all the spooky decorations and movies that come out around the holiday. I was actually binging those scary Reddit stories that people read off on YouTube. So, I was a little jittery. Abby, my girlfriend, had driven down to her parents' house for a family emergency. I would be home alone for a few days, which didn't help. I was cramming to finish an essay that was due that night at around 11, so I practically barricaded myself in my room to avoid distractions. Hours later, after I finished my paper, I was greeted by feces on the living room floor. Shit, I thought to myself. I had forgotten to let Lucy, my girlfriend's dog, out to pee. She was a pretty quiet dog. She hardly ever whined or barked, so she didn't let me know she needed to be let out. I couldn't be mad at her though. I should have remembered to let her out. I opened the back door, letting the anxious old lab out to pee in the yard. She really took her time out there, and I didn't want to wait for her, so I normally left the sliding door open slightly. Lucy would open the door with her snout, and I would know she was back inside because the screen door would be open wider than I left it. Genius, I know. I made a sandwich in the kitchen while watching more of those spooky Reddit stories. I heard the screen door open in the other room, so I knew Lucy was back. After taking a huge bite, I walked over and closed the back door. Now, it was around sunset, so the day's worth of scary stories were starting to catch up to me. I had the paranoid feeling like I was being watched, like someone was standing just outside my kitchen window ready to stab me the moment I look away. I brushed it off as paranoia as I sat down in the living room to play the new Black Ops game online with some of my college buddies. As the night progressed, I became more and more anxious. I always played with the living room lights off, but it seemed extra dark that night. Maybe the moon wasn't out or something. I couldn't shake the feeling like I was being watched. I fully had the creeps at this point, constantly checking over my shoulder at the entrance to the kitchen. Eventually, I started hearing what sounded like thumps. I took off my headset to listen for a moment. Nothing but silence. I considered turning on the lights, but I knew I was being ridiculous. I don't believe in the supernatural, and I knew those Reddit stories just had me in a weird mood. I started to laugh, telling my friends in the game party how paranoid I am. I reassure myself that I'm fine. I'm just following the same routine I do every night. I thought to myself, maybe I just feel weird because Abby is gone, and I'm not used to being in this house alone. Around 11, that uneasy feeling returned. I was still playing Black Ops in the living room. Just to the right of the TV is the hallway that leads to my bedroom. I had left the door slightly opened earlier. I was focusing on the game, but in my peripheral, I swear I saw the door open slightly just before the top of someone's head peeked out to look at him. My eyes shot down the hall, but my retinas were fried from the bright light of the TV. All that I could see were pink and blue dots. I quickly stood up and flipped on the light, but there was nothing at the end of the hall, just the door that I'd left cracked open. Now, I was really starting to freak out. I told my friends that I would be right back. I wanted to check on something. I cautiously walked down the hall toward my bedroom. I opened the door and flipped on the light. Nothing. Nothing in the room even seemed to be touched. I checked the closet just to be safe. Again, nothing. I was relieved, but a little shaken. I shut off the lights right before leaving the room. I also closed the door behind me. I left the lights on in the living room while I continued to play Black Ops, constantly glancing down the hall. I was focused more on my bedroom door than the actual game. My friends noticed my drop in performance and asked me what was wrong. I just told them I was getting tired. It was around midnight after all. Yeah, I'm gonna hop off. I've got to be up at 8 a.m. tomorrow, one of my friends said. My other friends agreed. It was a Wednesday, so we all had to get up the next day for classes. One by one, my friends left the party until I was completely alone, and really anxious. It's not like Lucy could help either. Like I said before, if someone broke in, I doubt she would bark or even wake up to protect me. I reluctantly walked down the hall into my bedroom. Again, nothing seemed to be out of place. But I was still worried. I checked the closet again, but there was nothing there. What were you expecting to see? The boogeyman? I started chastising myself. I looked at my bed. It was pretty close to the ground, so no person bigger than a child could fit under it. Still, I wanted to check. I'm being insane. I mean, I like watching those Reddit videos, but they're gonna do this to me. I might need to stop watching them altogether, I thought to myself. I started getting almost angry with myself over the way I'd been acting. I forced myself to resist checking under the bed. I knew that I couldn't keep feeding my paranoia. I got into bed, laying on the right side like I always do. I turned off my bedside lamp. However, once the adrenaline of my self-criticism wore off, and the darkness that surrounded me set in, all my fears returned. I need to get to sleep, I kept telling myself. My eyes darted around the room, half expecting to see a tall man with an axe standing in the shadowy corner by my door, or a ghost child floating above my bed. Around 10 minutes of this self-inflicted terror passed as I tossed and turned. Eventually, I'd had enough. I reached over to my nightstand and popped 2 5-milligram melatonin tablets. That's the only way I could see myself getting to sleep that night. I really didn't want to be nodding off during class the next morning. It didn't take long for the melatonin to kick in. In about 5 minutes, all my fears had drifted out of my mind. I turned over on my right side as the calm washed over me. I could feel myself losing consciousness. I was relieved to finally escape my fears when all of a sudden, I heard a single bark that sounded like it was coming from the back of the house. My eyes shot wide open. There's no way, I thought. That can't be Lucy. It must be a neighbor's dog. I'm stunned with terror as I realized that I never saw Lucy walking around the house. In fact, the last time I saw her was when I let her out. But if she didn't come back inside, how would the screen door? Thump. Something bumped my mattress. The underside of my mattress. I am now fully awake, petrified as I hear something shuffling around on the carpet on the left side of my bed. There is no way. I hear the sheets behind me start slowly rustling. I just wanted to stay still, but I knew that I would probably die if I didn't make a move. I slowly turned my head, looking over at the left side of the bed. A long, thin, unkempt arm was reaching out with the darkness. It was feeling around where my girlfriend normally slept. A dirty head peeked over the side of the bed, just enough so I could see its eyes. The same head I thought I'd imagined peeking out of my bedroom. I've never screamed so loud in my life. I scrambled toward the right side of the bed. I must have scared the shit out of it because it jumped back, away from the bed. I tried to turn on the bedside lamp, but in a panic, I accidentally knocked it on the floor. Fight or flight kicked in. I knew that I had to get that light on. I couldn't fight this thing off in the dark, especially if it had a knife or something. I fell off the right side of the bed. As I reached for the lamp, I heard it jump on the bed. It was breathing loudly through its teeth. I switched on the lamp. I'll never forget what I saw when the lights went on. The creature was quickly scurrying across the bed. The light illuminated it from the underside, which cast a horribly large silhouette of the creature across the ceiling. It shrieked, cowering once again in the furthest corner of the room, the one right in front of the door. I stood up in disbelief as I held the lamp toward it. The creature was a woman. She was horribly thin, and her face looked like it was made of wax. Her terribly matted hair was black with gray streaks. She was clenching her jaw so tight that I could see her rotten yellow teeth past her then chapped lips. I was shocked. I wanted to scream again, but I couldn't make a noise. I just stood there shaking, holding the lamp out in front of me. The woman was hunched into a ball, rocking herself back and forth. Her breathing became more violent. Spit flew from her mouth as she breathed heavily through her clenched teeth. Her rocking became quicker. She looked like she was gripping something in her hand. I assumed it was some kind of weapon, like a knife. I waited for her breathing to slow down before I gently felt her on the top of my nightstand, searching for my phone, making sure not to take my eyes off her. I called the police. They dispatched 3 squad cars out to my location immediately. The operator stayed on the phone with me. She told me to stay where I was, as the woman was blocking my only exit. I was afraid she would try to attack me again, but she never did. The woman just continued to rock back and forth, muttering to herself. After what felt like an eternity, the police finally arrived. They had to break down the front door to get into my home because I had locked it before I went to bed. I yelled for them to signal where I was. I warned them that she was near the door and that I thought she might have a knife in her hand. She was so tense. It took multiple officers to pry her out of her ball position. Once they did, I was again horrified. In her left hand, the woman was adamantly gripping a syringe. A used syringe. I couldn't imagine what would have happened if she managed to stick me with it. I could have contracted HIV, AIDS, or something worse. Needless to say, I didn't go to class the next morning. To this day, I still have nightmares about that night. What if Lucy never barked? Or if Abby was home? She normally went to bed before me. She could have been the one attacked in the night. I try not to think about it. I've been getting better recently, as I've been seeing a therapist about the incident. I guess if there is a moral to the story, it would be that you shouldn't downplay your fears. Most of the time, you're probably just paranoid. But sometimes, there might really be something watching you. So, it's not a bad idea to play it safe and check under your bed before turning out the lights.